Welcome to our Celtic Breeze podcast with me, Dr. Seamus Dillon, where we're going to have conversations on all things Celtic, Celtic spirituality, Celtic gods and goddesses, and so on, and how we, in the 21st century, can learn from our Celtic ancestors. Celtic Breeze podcasts will be launched later next month, and for now, we're going to tempt you with some fascinating conversations with special guests. And today we're talking about St. Bridget, and I'm joined by Dr. Karen Ward, who's an expert in counseling psychotherapy and shamanic energy therapy. And Karen tells me that she had a yearning to sit in Irish themed women's circles, and as such, she founded Moon Manaw in 2009. Based in Dublin, Karen and her husband founded and run the Sliabh an Chrí School of Irish Celtic Shamanism, which they describe as a holistic way of living and healing in tandem with nature-based spirituality. Very interesting. Dr. Karen Ward, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Seamus. It's an honor and a privilege to be here on this auspicious date.
Exactly. So tomorrow we're going to be celebrating Bridget's Day, and I know, Karen, you have a fascination, you have a strong interest in Saint Bridget and Bridget, the Celtic goddess. Maybe tell us maybe how that started, and how it has developed into the person you are today.
Well, my great grandmother, Julia Vaughan, her cottage was literally a stone's throw from Bridget's Fire Temple in Kildare. And my grandmother, Kathleen, grew up there, and my mother spent her holidays there. So I really feel I have um, imbued all of that wonderful Bridget energy. Interesting enough, my grandmother met my grandfather, who was a soldier on the Curragh, and he was from Clondalkin, where there also is a Bridget's Well and a very strong Bridget tradition. So it wasn't really until I was an adult that I began to look into, if you will, my Celtic scholarship and my research for various books, and realized the wonder of the ways of these pre-Celtic goddess of Bridget and also the matron saint, and how it was very much applicable to my modern life, and how if it was coming to me out of the mists of time to inspire how I am as a woman today.
Yeah, so it reached out to you. It came to you more than you went to it. It sounds like there, yeah. And you mentioned in passing there the Celtic breed and the Christian saint Saint Bridget. So I suppose just to point out that there are two breeds, two Bridgets, and we have the Celtic goddess breed and we have the Christian Saint Bridget, and they seem to me to have been very similar characters, very similar qualities. But maybe can you, I suppose, enlighten us as to the differences, or maybe break the two apart and give us the two characters? Who were they?
It's a conundrum for many people, and yet it sits in that glorious paradox that we often embrace in Ireland. The pre-Celtic goddess Bridget was a triple goddess, and she was written about in some of the ancient texts. Bridget the healer, Bridget the inspiration for poets, and Bridget the blacksmith, daughter of the Dagda. He was the father god. And then the other ancient texts, such as the Lara Gavala Éireann and Cormac's Glossary, as well as three books on the life of Bridget, speak of her as a saint, the matron saint of Ireland, if you will. And interesting enough, she also has a healing aspect, an inspirational aspect, and a blacksmithing. And of course, both of them are synonymous with the time of spring. The goddess would have ushered in this time of year of hope, of fertility. It's called Imbolc, meaning the Irish Gaelic for in the belly. So the sheep, the ewes with the lambs in their belly, and also in bulk, meaning ewe's milk. And Bridget would have the same attribute. So for me, Seamus, it's that phenomenon of syncretism where a more modern belief system sits on top of an older belief system that we see in many Indigenous communities around the world. So therefore, Bridget's fire temple, which would have been an old Druidic site, and the Bridget's Cathedral, St Bridget's Cathedral, was basically built right beside it. So the two of them are inextricably woven, if you will. And although none of the ancient texts mention St Bridget and Goddess Bridget in the same book, the same text, as you say, the attributes are very, very similar. And therefore, there is a theory that Bridget, the saint, was an incarnation of the goddess Bridget.
Okay, and when you mentioned that they were inextricably linked, and is it fair to say, is it correct to say that Saint Bridget, or Bridget when she was in Kildare, would have known about the Celtic goddess Breed or Bridget?
Well, it was said that particularly the fire temple, now she was a goddess of water and fire, so her wells are very nearby. But it was said that she kept the perpetual fire, which was very much part of the Irish Celtic shamans or the Druesses, the Druids. They would have had a perpetual fire. Now, there are those who might say, well, surely in those times there was always fires going, and there would have been, but this was a sacred fire, much on the lines of what we would have heard about in Greek or Roman times. Um, so that there was, that Saint Bridget would have been aware of this before her. And again, one would sit on top of the other from what we know of those ancient texts, which of course were written many moons after her life.
Exactly, and that's what I was just thinking too. But you mentioned the incarnation, the Celtic, the Christian Bridget being the incarnation of the Celtic Bridget. I suppose it's the million-dollar question. But would Saint Bridget, would she have thought that herself? Would that have been something that would have been that she would have wanted? Do you think, or because I know when Saint Patrick's time and around the same period, they were trying to get the people to move away from the Celtic beliefs and the Celtic way of doing things and to turn to the one God, the Christian God. Um, would you think St. Bridget would have been like that? That she would have been a bit wary of the Celtic breed and the Celtic past?
It's a good question. My sense is that, much like the monks on the Skelligs, or I think the Catholic ways when they first came to Ireland were embraced in a very paganistic way. And we see that with the symbol of the Bridget's cross. This is an equilateral cross, north, east, south, west, and then the center, the heart, the soul, if you will, the Celtic soul. And my sense is that Bridget, Patrick, St. Brendan, that they would have embraced the Catholic ways very much in tandem with those animistic ways. And to all intents and purposes, it was when the Normans came over many years later, they brought that more Roman way of looking at it. I mean, think about it. St. Bridget was also known as Mary of the Gales. So therefore there was, they looked at her, oh, Mother Mary, that warm, nurturing, looking after the mother, the midwife. So that, again, I talk of syncretism, where an older religion was subsumed into the modern religion. So therefore that the people could see, that's the same. Okay, I get that. Cosula, yes, I can understand. I like to think that Bridget would have been delighted to be considered with that wonderful ancient way of looking at, here was this guardian, this guide of this very special time of the year, Imbolc. So I like to think she would have embraced it.
Brilliant, yeah. And I'm just thinking, you mentioned Imbolc there, and I suppose to make matters more confusing, but also very interesting and beautiful, is that festival of Imbolc coincides with the festival of Bridget. And I'm just wondering, are they both linked? And maybe start by telling us about the festival of Imbolc.
Well, Imbolc, the Irish Gaelic, in the belly, or the ewe's milk, and it is the third in the year. So starting with Samhain, start of the Celtic year, winter solstice, the winter, and then we're coming into spring. And Saint Bridget died on the 1st of February. And interesting enough, her close companion and the woman who took over as the head of the monastery, Darludac, she also died a year later on exactly the same day. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the goddess and the saint are both associated with this particular day. Now, if we talk about arco-astronomically, Imbolc does change every year. So sometimes this year it's on the 4th, sometimes it's on the 3rd. But as with a lot of Celtic festivals, we take a definitive date. So it's usually on the 1st of February. The reason St. Bridget's feast day is because that is the day of her death. But now we have this new national holiday, and it has fallen on the 5th. Last year was on the 6th, on the Monday. So that means very quickly we have a week-long festival of Bridget. And it's been extraordinary to see, not just in Ireland and particularly in Dublin, but around the world, how this has been embraced as a celebration of women, as a celebration of nature ways of being, of crafting, and of those attributes of healing, of inspiration, and practicality for both men and women. I think it's extraordinary and just shows you what was there already, just waiting to be brought forth.
And if we extract the Christian Bridget from the Celtic Bridget and Imbolc, and kind of isolate her for a second and look at her on her own, and I suppose there probably more tangible evidence about the Saint Bridget, the Christian Bridget, that we have in writings and so on. And you mentioned about maybe a festival of womanhood and the status of the woman and so on. And now that we have St. Bridget's Day or Bridget's Day, and you mentioned it's nearly a week-long festival. Again, another $1 million question, but St. Bridget, that person that we've extracted there for a second, what would she think of 2024 and a festival celebrating her life, and how would she like to have been remembered if we talk about legacies and so on?
I think she would be delighted. I think she would love to see how we're embracing her equality, diversity, sustainability, how we are honouring the earth in a way that had been lost until relatively recently in a more mainstream fashion. She was a woman of peace, a woman of justice. I think she would be also very happy to see that we Irish people have embraced our shadow, that we are recognising our mistakes, um, from civil wars to the Troubles to the abuses within the church and the institutions, that we are recognizing who we are as a people. I think that's very empowering. It's us going through our process, so to speak. And from all that you read about or sense about Bridget, that she was not an airy fairy titular head, be that goddess or saint, but a very down to earth, practical. And it was said that she was a mediator as well from people who had, say, conflicts in the locality. And I think she would be very happy to see that already this mature, profound festival has morphed, rather than poor old St. Patrick who gets green beer and us dressing up in green clothes. I mean, there seems to be maybe a little bit more profundity to Bridget at the moment. Not to say that there isn't fun as well, but I like to think that this particular festival embodies her particular attributes, and at this time of early spring.
So if we take Bridget and put her back in with St. Bridget back in with the Celtic Bridget and the Festival of Imbolc, and we look at them as a unit. And for this podcast or these podcasts, I want us to look at how Celtic spirituality and the Celts can maybe inform how we live today, can maybe teach us some lessons about how we can live our lives in 2024 and in the 21st century indeed. And you talked about St. Bridget and her sense of fairness, how she mediated conflict, how she looked after maybe the needy and the hungry, and her sense of equality and how we can learn about equality from her. Now when we're living in a world where there is much conflict. There's a lot of inequality, a lot of people hungry, and sometimes women aren't treated as equal as men are. What can we learn from that trio, if you like, the Imbolc, St Bridget, and the Celtic goddess Breed, that can help us live in 2024 and 21st century?
I think we can embrace the ways that she has gifted us if you imagine them, her legend and lore coming down the ages. And my sense is that Bridget, in both of her guises, would have started with the personal and radiated that out. We often forget, as we abhor violence and wars in the world, we forget that in our heads we sometimes are more violent than anything we see, where we beat ourselves up for what we're not doing or what we should be doing or what we are doing. And I think if we start with coming from our head to our heart, to connecting with what is around us, for recognizing that we're human, we make mistakes, and then for bringing in that sense of the hospitality of Ireland. They say the Céad Míle Fáilte. We're in an interesting juncture where, having had 8 million people on the island pre-famine, we then went down to nearly 3 million, and we've only come back up to around the 5 million. And we, as citizens of Europe now, we are welcoming new people to our shores, and we need to make sure that we have that Céad Míle Fáilte, that we recognise that the diversity and the equality and the hospitality that Bridget offered, that we too have them. And that comes from the bottom up. So the bottom up is the top down. So from government level, and how that is put to the people, to how in our communities we embrace that. And also with Imbolc, if we take that as a time of action after the winter hibernation, that sometimes it's as simple as growing something in on our balconies, on our windowsills, in our garden, to show and teach our children about the how life is, how food is grown, how we can nurture ourselves, and to maybe to swim, to walk in the forests, to embrace that contemplative mindfulness that are recent buzz or catchwords, but have been there for millennia. And we are coming to embrace that more and more in the busyness of the world, and recognizing the solace and, most importantly, the hope that they offer to us today.
That's really nice. And as you were speaking there, I can see the passion you have for this topic and for the two Bridgets, if you like. And I know tomorrow, St. Bridget's Day, you're not going to be sitting back looking out the window. I can sense that you're going to be very active tomorrow. So how are you going to celebrate Bridget's Day tomorrow?
Well, tonight I'm going to put out my Brat Breed. This is my little piece of cloth representing Bridget's cloak. And it was said her cloak was dyed with blackberries. So it's often a red or a purpley or a blue strip of cloth. And this will catch the morning dew, and is said then to be imbued with Bridget's healing properties for me and my family during the year ahead. So I'd wrap it around a sore finger, or if I had a headache, I might put it near my head, under my hat, a pillow, wherever I might need that. So that's the first thing I'll do. I then will visit my local Phoenix Park and walk along with the deer and the squirrel and the wood pigeons. I might even see Michael D and Sabina wave into them at the Aris. And tomorrow night, with my husband, I am offering an Irish Celtic Imbolc celebration with the Society for Shamanic Practice, which is a worldwide practice. And then myself and the Moonmanaw, the women, we are offering Bridget's Fire Blessing in an online, again, an international community. So that means we're bringing the beauty and the grace of Bridget to awaken within each of us those qualities of passion, enthusiasm, and the creativity. So a very lovely, a nice easy day, beautifully combining nature with the practicalities, and then in community later on.
Excellent. And you mentioned there about the moon manal and the shamanic practices and so on. And I know that you're involved in many of those. So if people want to find out more about yourself or indeed any of those topics, what should they do?
Well, the women's gatherings are moonmanaw.ie. I think I have it down there.
Yeah.
The Irish Celtic Shamanism, myself and my husband, we have a lovely self-paced introduction to Irish Celtic Shamanism on slioncree.ie. And then with my academic hat on, I offer an introduction to energy therapy from a shamanic perspective. And there's many counselors, psychotherapists, psychologists who yearn to bring that sense of spirituality into their work. And this is a very safe and beautiful way to do so. That has been part of my doctorate research, copper fastened by three Irish universities, DCU, UCD, and Trinity College. And that's Dr. Karen Therapist .ie.
Brilliant. So, Dr. Karen Ward, on this, the eve of St. Bridget's Day, Fhéile Bríde, Gur Míle Magat, and may the blessings of St. Bridget and the Celtic Breed be upon you always.
Gur Míle buíochas, should I say, agus slán go fóill. Ba next
Oh
breed.
my God.
Go léir.